Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Thomas McGonigal, and I'm here with my close friend, Dr. David Yates, and my new close friend, Nick Lippis from UNUG. And we're going to be talking today about a methodology that I'm very passionate about called fast systems thinking. And then before that, Nick and I are going to be talking about the UNUG Spring 2023 coming up on May 17th and 18th in Dallas, Texas. And my kind of role as a tutorial instructor talking about fast system thinking and this approach to modern network automation I call Git NOPS, which I'll dig into later. But welcome, Nick and David. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you,
Uh,
Thomas.
my pleasure to be here, Thomas, with you, and nice to meet you, David.
So, Nick, I think we once talked a little bit about ONUG. Would you mind giving the elevator pitch for ONUG and where it came from and what you're doing?
Yeah, sure. Well, ONUG is the largest community of kind of global 2000 IT execs that meet twice a year in Dallas and also in Manhattan. So the one that's coming up is on May 17th and 18th. It's hosted by board member and kind of co-chair Chris Moriarty over at Cigna. So we're going to have like a great group of people and probably like I think pretty close to like between 25 and 30 sponsors on the show floor and probably about 500 to 600 people in the community gathering over in Dallas, which is great because we haven't been to Dallas in 3 years. Thanks to the pandemic, so we're really excited to come back out and to be part of the community in the Lone Star State. So yeah.
Hey, just a personal note, I've attended ONUG as a speaker before, and I did a seminar on DevOps and with another person from Boston, and then Douglas Comer, who wrote the TCP/IP book. He was the moderator, and I reached out to him, Nick, to ask him if he wanted to get coffee in Dallas, and he said, and I met his wife too, and Christine, and so we're gonna grab coffee in Dallas, and so he's like,
Yeah.
I've owned his book, since I was like, since I could walk, whatever, walk in networking, so it's very
Yeah.
exciting. Yeah.
Doug is like a towering figure like in the networking industry, and he's
Yeah.
actually going to do the second day keynote.
Oh,
So
great.
he's coming in. He's talking about kind of AI, ChatGPT, and how it impact kind of network operations and SOC teams. So Dave, Doug has a really good perspective, on this stuff. He's been there for a long time in the industry and really great neutral, personality. So, it's like it won't be a lot of fluff, that we're hearing from a lot of folks who really don't know what they're talking about. Here it'll be the real deal, and so really looking forward to that.
Oh, that's so cool. I I just was looking so forward. I just want to personally say thank you for having me come. But really, the point of my talk is this new coined expression, hyper automation. So just forgive the joke, but I've been hyper about automation for 20 years, right? And so it's nothing new to me, but I really like Gartner's new definition. And if anyone out there, I don't know how to put it in the chat, but if you go to fastsystemthinking.com/HA for hyper automation, that'll bring you to the Gartner definition. And I know you guys, ONOG, has a hyper automation working group.
Yeah.
And could you give a little bit more detail on that?
Yeah, so the hyperautomation group has been around for probably about a good 2 years or so. We had a couple of other working groups that were working on different parts of automation, and we brought them all together into hyperautomation. So what we're focusing on, it really is kind of configuration management, change management around infrastructure, and so the tools that they're looking at are there are basically platform tools to do automation. There's also kind of ingredients, like artificial intelligence, machine learning, kind of event-based software. There's probably two or three other kind of like tool chests or tools in the tool chest that they're all evaluating. But their focus is really around, I think, one thing in singularly, and that is how to increase the efficacy of Knox and also SOX at the cost of toil. So, how do you get toil out of those systems and utilize the tools that are available and allow them to deliver more value? Because we need it, because like there is such a massive shortage of operational people who understand networking and security. in the marketplace. And so automation won't solve that entire problem, but it'll help in the process of, having knocks and socks that are um, um, have great efficacy.
But, Nick, I have to just say that really resonates with me. My career in automation has been filled with toil. And back in the old battle days, when I like in 2000, circa 2007, I was spinning up Puppet instances. You'd spin up a virtual machine, and then you'd make this one config change, and it didn't work. And you'd spin it down, spin it, and that toil, was difficult. And I've even way more toilful stories than that. But that mission is just so important, and you know and it just speaks volumes to me. It's so important to me. I love that.
Well, I think, Thomas, you represent kind of the new face of this industry, right? It's like folks that are my age that have been around for a long time, like we were basically, using CLI to do all this configuration stuff, right? So it's like it was very cut and paste and kind of command line oriented, and you'd have to do like configure one switch, one router at a time, and it's like if you had like a network with 10,000 of these things, talk about toil, and also like once the network was kind of up and running, you didn't want to breathe on it, or touch it, for fear of, it impacting, the applications, because like, as we all know, everything runs over the network, and when the network goes down, business basically stops, so it's extremely important, to be able to like one, keep that system up to, doing software releases, doing configuration changes that are needed without it impacting the overall, environment of IT, and really in kind of the digital business of the organization. So I think your skill set and the way your toil, you were using automation tools like Ansible and Puppet and so forth, and to a lot in kind of my generation of this industry, they weren't available. So now it's like the skill set is expanding for people to like, okay, what are these automation tools? How does Python figure into this stuff? How does like Ansible, figure into it? How do I manage this infrastructure that has become more software oriented, like software? What's that lifecycle management kind of like? So I think there's all of these new kind of skills and requirements that are now part of and network engineers, time, or their skill set has really expanded over the course of the last couple of years. And you represent that, you've been kind of living that for the last, I don't know, decade or so.
Well, it's a wonderful segue. It's almost like we rehearsed this before, but we didn't, everyone out in userland. And so it's a great segue into fast systems thinking. And then I want to loop back to you, Nick, to discuss, the fast systems thinking and its applicability to ONUG Spring 2023. And then you're free to drop and just, thank you for all these opportunities and all the participation on LinkedIn with me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been great. And like the social engagement has been really super.
Oh, good. Thank you. So we have fast systems thinking. That's what we're here to discuss today. And and Nick referred to it. He said, I have this kind of new age kind of approach, and I describe it as modern, right? And so it comes from this toil that I suffered, for the last 15, 20 years in DevOps, and I've always had my foot in networking, right? And what came out of that is this earnest desire to kind of espouse and to tell people that automation just isn't the bits on the bytes. It's also this really critical approach in this systems thinking. And so when you think of systems thinking, I think of it as very academic, right? I actually basically have a master's degree in it. I've checked it with David. David teaches in the master's degree program that I have, and my degree was literally called information technology, but it was really focused on systems analysis and design. And then and what I'm going to do now, fellas, is I'm going to share and present my screen. I want to share the fast systems thinking.com website, and I just want to walk everyone through very quickly. I can figure out how to share my screen. What's going on with that? Well, this is really kind of interesting the way StreamYard works. It allows you to pick a particular tab, and I have like a million tabs. Oh, I found it. Okay, so this is really kind of neat. So can you see the fast system, the
Yeah.
go.fast system? Okay,
Yes,
so
we can.
the URL is go.fastsystemthinking.com, and I created this Venn diagram, and based on my undergraduate and graduate, and then the first 8 years of my career, I was a network engineer focused on systems analysis and design. I was working for the Federal Aviation Administration's air traffic control management system, and then right after that, in 2007, I jumped into DevOps with Puppet with both feet, and I haven't looked back since. And then throughout my whole career, I've been incredibly focused on network and engineering. And then I have this kind of personal approach, or this personal vendetta, it's not the right word, but this personal aspect or focus on speed and agility, and how that is really a differentiator in your career. And that comes from my experience playing football. I played football for 8 years, and football is entirely a speed sport. You train in the weight room to get as strong as possible, but all of the competitive advantage comes from speed. And so I've kind of combined these all into a tactics and strategy, and then Dave and I are going to be discussing that and the need for that. And then these overlaps is where these kind of words that have always been a big part of my career, that made the entire career, extensibility, reliability, repeatability, and scalability and security all come in. And I created this coded, a methodology for fast system thinking, and it's an acronym, CODED, and it's about getting things done in an automated way. And I'll let everyone kind of look at that and figure that out themselves and talk about that. But Nick, I just wanted to thank you so much. David and I are going to dig into the need for basically an automation master's degree. And so that's kind of our agenda. But thank you, Nick. Thank you.
Yeah, welcome. But you can't get rid of me this quick. So I have a couple of questions.
Okay, please.
All right. So we're in kind of the kind of supply chain does this impact? So meaning what I mean by supply chain is, okay, you have kind of usually kind of engineers and architects that design kind of an infrastructure, and that usually gets handed over to an operations team, right? That was kind of pre-DevOps days, right? And it still is pretty much like how large organizations like manage this infrastructure, right? So I'm kind of assuming that this is really kind of geared towards the operational automation of that infrastructure.
That's
right?
absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And so what are the key tools that you have?
So for me, everything is really kind of working off of the principles and practices of DevOps, specifically CI/CD, right?
Yeah.
So what we're talking about is using Git, for example, the GitHub's Git, and managing your infrastructural code, whether it's Terraform or Ansible, doesn't matter, but it's infrastructure as code. You have it captured, and you have it codified, and you have it available for collaboration, right? Managed in GitHub. And then GitHub has this incredible CI/CD system. It's called GitHub Actions. And this GitHub Actions allows you to get that code to the network devices. And the network devices are commanded and controlled by a GitHub Actions runner controller, which is like this Kubernetes cluster that would live inside your management LAN, right? So your management LAN is communicating with all your network devices. It would live inside there, and it would spawn n number of containers to communicate, for example, with Terraform or Ansible or like Postman, right? I love Postman, right? It doesn't. It's tool agnostic, but it's the conceptual benefits of collaborative code software development applied to network automation and configuration and command and control. That's really kind of the workflow. But the thing I didn't mention, Nick, is that when you start doing all that cool CI/CD stuff, you can do automated testing, you can do penetration testing, you can do testing, right? You can really massage and manipulate and take advantage of this workflow, and it's really, really, really powerful. And this is, I really didn't kind of mention it, but this has been my life's work for the last 8 years.
Wow. Yeah. Well, it sounds amazingly powerful, and kind of leveraging tools that are already there, and also kind of best practices, on what's been developed in the DevOps community. Where I think what's really great about whether it's Ansible or Terraform, what have you, is that this is not just for on-prem. Clearly, it's like for a multi-cloud environment. So it's like being able to kind of create an architecture in those two kind of platforms, and then kind of push that to Git, so that you can, I guess, test before it gets deployed. Have others comment, on it before it gets deployed. You get, collaboration on what that configuration kind of file looks like, and then actually Git can push it with the use of other tools into the infrastructure. And then
Oh, you get it, Nick. You
and
totally
then
get it.
and then fingers crossed that the friggin' thing works.
Well, on that note, the speed aspect that I was discussing earlier. So so Dave and I were discussing it this morning. What do you do if you can't test this massive, 2,000 switch network? What do you do? There's no digital twin, right? What do you do? Well, so my reaction is that with my design, you could push out the change, and if there's a problem, roll back in a quarter of a second, right? It's instantaneous, right? And so it's that speed. And so you do it on the weekend, right? Or you do it, when, or you just communicate that there's going to be a blip, and then no one notices, and you're able to roll back. You have this ability to use speed to kind of get over this problem with networking, that we don't have this testability across the entire attack surface, if you will, across the entire landscape, right? And so my reaction is if you make it faster, you can make it almost instantaneous.
Awesome. Great. All right. Let me, leave so I don't kind of like interrupt the flow.
Yeah. Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Really, really great. I love it. And, Thomas, thanks for inviting me on. David, nice to meet you as well.
Nice to meet you as well. Thank you, Nick.
Okay. We'll see you guys at Onode.
Thanks, Nick.
See you.
Bye.
Hey, David.
Hey.
Would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. David Yates. I have been on the faculty at Bentley University for 18 years now, and I teach networking. I teach software development. I teach infrastructure, and so happy to be on here and learning and helping you understand fast system thinking.
Oh, thank you. And so, if you don't mind, I think we should just jump into coded, and then we'll get into the importance of graduate work, because my thesis is that the world needs an automation master's degree, right? And so,
yes,
what does that actually look like? So let's just jump into coded. So I think you'll probably notice that the DevOps diet is the last D in coded. Right?
Sure.
So I just want to start there. That's the do, right?
Right.
The 3 exclamation marks, right? And so this could you give kind of the historical background on DevOps diet at Booz Allen Hamilton? And
Sure. So, I mean, what we were doing when we were working together, and this is almost 10 years ago now, is trying to come up with a systematic way to think about evolving Agile and DevOps and all of the automation around that, and really making it something that someone who is onboarding their first day would end their first day in understanding it. And so the systematic approach that we developed was the 4 phases that we see on the screen you're sharing now. Thank you, Thomas. One is to define success. So if you're on a journey in the Agile and DevOps world, how do you know what success looks like, especially when you're working the scale of projects that you were working on, where these are big government agencies that needed to adopt cloud. And so now in 2023, if you read the latest memos out of the White House and OMB, the new thing to now adopt is zero trust, right? And so how do you do that? And the great thing about this systematic approach is these 4 steps can be applied to anything that has to do with technology development and deployment. So you define success, you identify a path. So is there a step-by-step way that you can build, implement, and approve what you're doing to nudge yourself towards success? Execute as a team. So one of the things that we sort of went into Booz Allen Hamilton with was, how do we really make sure that people understand the importance of mission focus and teamwork? And so you really need both. And so part of this is understanding that and to transform and innovate. And so this sort of sets up the fact that you're never really done on this journey. You may get to the next level, but then the complexity of your infrastructure goes up, or you end up in a multi-cloud environment. So how do you then think about how to sort of go back to the defining success criteria and then work forward again? Did I miss something, Thomas?
No, that was incredibly well done. Thank you. I really kind of put you on the spot, and you had to resuscitate 10-year-old thinking, which is impressive, David. I'm impressed. And so if it's okay with you, I'm just going to jump up to the top and just kind of walk through them again, and then, or not again, but just walk through them, and then if you have I'll actually ask you kind of commentary. And so, the very, very first part of systems thinking, it's the most important thing, according to me, is you have to figure out the constraints of the system.
Yep.
And in software, the constraints are way more difficult than in networking. And I hope anyone out in userland isn't offended by me saying that, but like, there's just so much more variability, right? And how do you capture the constraints? Well, you read the docs, right? You read the protocols. You understand what's going on in the network and with this networking space. And one of my favorite things about networking is how well documented some of these things are, right? Whether it's and I'm talking about like traditional like TCP/IP, RFCs, right? Not necessarily these like bespoke REST APIs that Joe Schmo created at your X company, right? But like the actual real networking parts. And so you first have to kind of figure out the constraints. And so that starts with reading the manual, if you will. And then David and I have really kind of I've fixated on the OODA loop, which was this the system that came out of, or this methodology that came out of a work by a fighter pilot during the Korean or the Vietnam War, and it's a split-second decision-making framework. And what you do is you observe, so you figure out what's going on, you orient, you kind of fixate on what to do next, you decide, you make that decision, and then you act. And so this is a fighter pilot's methodology or a framework for like attacking and dogfights. And so this is that concept of speed coming up again in fast systems thinking, and I really connect with it. I was actually talking with a friend today about kind of those dangerous personal situations, and there's an advantage, personal security like situations, and there's an advantage to reacting very, very quickly in those situations. You kind of take away the power of like the attacker. And so there's actually something really quite powerful about being as quick as possible in a bad situation. And I think David, I think there's quite a bit of applicability to some of the other stuff we're working on, namely Krav ZT, and which comes from Krav Vernettes. I'm sorry, Krav Maga. It's not, Krav Vernettes is like another thing I've worked on, and Krav Maga has an aspect of speed and quick reaction time, right? And in Krav Maga, you prepare yourself to always be kind of ready to launch into defensive or offensive maneuver based on what's going on. It's very OODA loop-ish, right? Would you agree, David?
No, I would agree. And the thing that I would point out, just like the systematic approach that I just articulated, you're kind of never done. So if your act is to evade the enemy or engage in an attack, that's going to be over in a matter of seconds or minutes, and you have to return to, okay, how do I have to now reobserve my new situation? How do I have to reorient my brain? How do I have to redecide what my next steps are, et cetera, et cetera? So it's that sort of environment where you're never done. So you're continually iterating and sort of moving around incrementally within that space.
No, I love it. Thank you, David. And then the next one is straight systems thinking. This is probably the most prominent, well-known, I keep on using the word methodology or framework for systems thinking is the DSRP, which stands for the distinctions, systems, relationships, and perspectives. And so, something that Dave and I have talked about before is this need to do this continual gap analysis. And so you have you've read the manuals, you kind of understand the distinctions, systems, the relationships, and then what people's kind of, or what the perspectives are of these different entities, right? And then you're able to kind of think about the system as a whole. This DSRP gives you this idea to think about it as a whole. And something that wasn't obvious to me until very, very recently is that network engineering is entirely a systems thinking exercise. Mm-hmm. And what that's about is the relationships, right? Networking is entirely a relationship problem. It's how does this switch connect to this other switch? How does this Wi-Fi network connect to the laptop? Et cetera, right? It's entirely a relationship problem. And so this DSRP will serve anyone very, very, very well in the networking space if they're able to kind of hone this systems thinking mentality or approach, right? David, do you have any additional comments?
So I think if I think to some of the conversations that Nick sort of seeded before he left us, I think one of the things he articulated was this difference between, okay, just keeping the network up and running, and I'm now talking about the routing and the switching, right? That's just about moving the packets around, making sure they get there. But from a user's point of view, that's somewhat abstracted away. And that's why that relationships idea that you just brought in is so important. So what is the relationship between the services that my user needs, whether they be, something as simple as something I can run in my browser versus accessing a database versus being able to execute a search, like all of those things that are meaningful to users map down via the relationships that you've described to the infrastructure that's running under the hood. And that complexity just sort of goes up when you not only think about the user, but you think about where the services come from. So it's not just on-premises systems. It's, it's in the Amazon cloud, it's in the Microsoft cloud, or it's in the Google cloud, or in the IBM cloud. So there's, the edge of the network has sort of kept spreading out. And I think it just makes all of this harder, and therefore requires an elevated level of systems thinking. That's probably the right way to describe it.
I love that. I think I'd argue that fast systems thinking is an elevated.
It is.
But I think what first of all, the fast system thinking is just kind of the name brand. Like you could describe it as secure systems thinking or network systems thinking. Like it doesn't matter, right? Like we're just talking about getting your hands around something and understanding it in a holistic way. That's really the point of fast systems thinking, right? And something you mentioned is that reminded me of the way like microservices work. Is there's these strong contracts between microservices and their relationships with other microservices, right? And they're literally called contracts. And so I'm contracting with you that when I say, give me all your user data, like sends it over via an API, and they communicate via API and microservices. But you kind of sparked. I think this could be a decent blog article, David, for us.
I agree.
This need for contracts for what you were describing. This need for these high-ordered, software services to have contracts with not just the personnel running the infrastructure, but the actual infrastructural components, right? I've never heard of that before. I think, and you sparked that idea. I think it's a decent idea.
Thank you, Tom. No, I agree. I think there's a lot there to unpack. And I don't think the answers are obvious, which is another important component of systems thinking. It forces you to, keep wrestling with a problem until you've completely unpacked it. And sometimes the problems are obvious and often they're not. So I think that's an important thing for our listeners to keep in mind.
Well, thank you, David. And then finally, we have express and communicate. And this is entirely something David and I have been focused on for years. And it's the importance of teamwork to DevOps and to systems thinking and to network engineering. You can't do this stuff alone. You can't go alone. It's not going to work. And you need to be a good communicator and you need to be a good teammate. And the teammate stuff comes up again in the DevOps diet. And it's execute as a team where you trust, communicate once again, and cooperate. And then if you have anything to say, David, feel free. Otherwise, we're going to jump into the need for a graduate degree in automation, network automation.
Okay. No, I think we've covered this, so we should move on.
Yeah. So would you mind articulating your academic background and what your graduate experience was like and what that looked like?
Sure. So I have sort of two arcs of training that have given rise to where I am today. So just so that you know, I teach in a business university. Bentley University is a business university, very focused on pragmatic development and deployment of technology. So I teach in a department that's called Computer Information Systems. I teach at both the undergraduate and the graduate level. And I would say the two arcs of training there that are so important are, first is my academic training. I have a master's and a PhD in computer science, both from UMass Amherst. And I also have industry experience. And I think for me to enter the classroom at a university like Bentley, I really need both. I need to have developed technology, seen it go out into the wild and see it succeed and see it fail. And then sort of pair that with sort of the academic rigor that goes into, what it takes to get a PhD. So that's my background in 2 minutes or less.
I mean, so you're training the next generation. You are a professor. You are literally a trainer and a teacher and so forth. Does Bentley have a sales pitch for getting a graduate degree? What would you say to someone?
So I would argue that the graduate degree is sort of a pathway to sort of elevating the sort of employer you want to work to. So I think that if you're going to do, for example, DevOps, I have a hard time imagining how you're going to do that without understanding, the hardware and architecture aspects of the system, the software side of the system, the networking in between, and understanding at a place like Bentley how all of this is business relevant. So, if you're thinking about cybersecurity, how do you resolve the paradox of allowing a technology team to innovate while this is sort of back to Goldratt, constraining them so that they don't introduce risk into the deployments. And so, it's resolving paradoxes like that. And I think that requires the rigor of going through a master's degree.
Yeah, I mean, that certainly lands with me. I mentioned, at the beginning of the stream that I have a master's degree from Bentley in information technology, which I argue is a master's degree in systems thinking. And, it served me incredibly well. Like, at the beginning of DevOps, I was able to identify it very, very easily, very quickly. And it was obviously because of my graduate work, and
Right.
my graduate studies. I think other people were kind of more reluctant or more what's a better word, like hesitant than I was. I jumped into it with 2 feet, and that's an understatement, right? Like early in the call, I made the joke about how hyper I was about automation. I was intolerable. You kind of knew me, and you let me
Right.
show up at your house every once in a while, but I was intolerable. All I did is talk about Puppet. And
And the reason it's so fundamental is without really addressing automation head on, how do you make technology development and technology deployment scale?
I think it's impossible. That's a great question. I mean,
Right.
is it possible to do network automation today? Nick, if you notice, he was talking about multi-cloud, but like I wanted to interject, and I kind of bit my tongue. There's also this kind of multi-cloudishness of Kubernetes, which is the networking is incredibly complex. And
Yes.
whether you're talking about like the new eBPF stuff that comes with Cilium, or whether you're talking about service mesh stuff, service mesh is not easy. Cert management with Cert Manager, and then the actual like weird IP table stuff that's happening on the pods themselves. It's really hard, and but important. When we were discussing with Nick before the call, he's doing all sorts of stuff around CNCF, and the project work around that.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, how could you ever dig into that complexity without a systems mindset, and without mastering it, right? Without being a master of it.
That's right. That's right.
You'd be toast.
I think you've just made a great case for a graduate degree, Thomas. Thank you.
Yeah, well, so I'm starting my second master's degree in cybersecurity at UMass Lowell, and so by the way, is that a like affiliated with UMass Amherst, your alma mater, or is it like?
So it's part of the UMass. Yeah, it's part of the UMass system. So we all report up into the same body within Mass Higher Ed. So yeah, they're affiliated. They just have 5 different.
It's not your alma mater. Obviously, it's a different institution, right?
Right. Yeah, UMass Lowell is a different institution. Absolutely. But it has the advantages of drawing on people like yourself. So people with experience who want to, sort of upskill in a new area like cybersecurity. There's more people like that near Lowell than there are near Amherst. And so, Amherst is kind of a, I don't want to say it's mostly undergraduate because they have great graduate programs too, but it's a place where you go and you live and go to school. Whereas UMass Lowell is a place where you need to be near your employer and also advancing your education. And so it's a different student audience.
Yeah, I mean, you described me. I mean, UMass Lowell is so close, right? To where I live in my home. Amherst is not, right?
Exactly. You would have to move.
Yeah, I have to move. I've forgotten, what is your master's degree in?
Computer science as well.
Computer science as well. So you have a master's degree and then a doctoral degree in CS. And at what point in that academic career did you feel like a master? Like, I wasn't a master of information technology when I graduated in 2005, right? I was like a couple of years out of undergrad, and I had like 4 or 5 years of work experience, good work experience.
Right. So it's funny that you say that. So in my mind, and these titles aren't exactly standardized. So in my journey, I don't feel like I had mastered anything until I'd gone through the academic rigor, and then actually achieved it in the practice. And so for me, when I became a principal software engineer, right, to me that was like, okay, this starts to feel like mastery, and that's a very important difference because you're not only paid for the code you write and what you're doing to make sure that it works and test it and all that, but you're also responsible for mentoring the new hires. So I think mastery, the first sign that you might be earning that title, if we can call it a title in quotes, is that you're entrusted with mentoring other people. And as soon as
Oh,
you're
I love
doing
that.
that, yeah, as soon as you're doing that, you become a teacher, and it doesn't matter if you're in the classroom or you're in the corporate world developing technology. You've become a master, or you're
Well, I
on the
think I think
roll.
you're aware. So, as soon as I got my master's degree, I started teaching. I taught
Yeah,
intro to IT at Bentley, and then the Benjamin Franklin Institute of Technology, which I'm very proud of. And the requirements to teach at the junior college or undergraduate level is a master's degree.
that's exactly
And
right.
and I love what you said. I totally connected with it. So you might not know this, David, but my favorite Latin expression is "Don't say discas," which means teach so that you yourself may learn, right? And
Yes,
I'm trying to recall when I got the architect title. I think it might have. I really don't recall. Like they kind of throw around the solution architect title. So is it really an architect? Who knows? But I wouldn't. I mean, so at some point in the last 10 years, I became like an architect level person, right? And
right.
teaching, or even the articulation of a design adequately and well, and being able to accomplish that is really the differentiator. And so I would say does that make sense? So it's the teaching and the communication skills, right? And what
Absolutely,
and so
absolutely.
I didn't become a decent writer till grad school. Undergrad, I don't think I was like even halfway decent. It was the 60-page research papers that I had to chug through that got me to the point where people were like, wow, you're a good writer, and I'm so proud of that experience. And like I'd argue that's probably the most that's probably the biggest benefit from my graduate experience was being able to write a coherent email, Slack message,
Right.
blog, whatever, right?
Yeah, I think the other thing that's important about your world that I want people who are listening to appreciate is you're an architect that not only develops solutions and thinks through these multi-vendor scenarios, but you have enough wherewithal to sit down with a customer, learn their language, and then explain how the solution will work for them. And to me, that's you've become an evangelist for the work that you've done over the years, and you become an evangelist for the company you're representing, and hopefully the customer's interest, because if those don't line up, there's no deal going to happen. So there's a mastery in not only developing an architecture but also being able to communicate it in a way that's accessible, and you have to meet people where they are, whether it's a customer or a student or whomever.
It's obvious. First of all, I don't think we've really shared your entrepreneurial background, but it's obvious you're at a business school. That's an incredibly important aspect of being an architect, and no one talks about it. Frankly, it's that
Yeah,
customer.
yeah, you're right. That's a missed opportunity. Maybe another blog for us, Tom.
Yeah, are you taking notes? I'm not taking notes. Maybe someone in userland can ping us about it. But there's one thing I wanted to include is this is single-handedly the very very best article on mastery I've ever read, and it's written by I think it's at the bottom. I think the author's at the bottom. It's my to-do list company. See how long it is, David?
Yeah,
I'm flying through it. There's this woman right here. I've actually reached out to her before. I don't think I connected, but Fadika Adejobi. I don't know, it's an African name. I don't know how to pronounce it, but Fadiki was in marketing at Doist, and I'm going to try and reach out to her again because this is literally. I mean, I reflect on this blog all the time. It's a treaty. Is that how you pronounce it? Treatise or
treatise. Yeah,
treatise? Thank you, treatise. And it's so well done. Oh, here's her picture here as well. It's
yeah,
such a good article. But like one of the things it talks about is that there is like a body of work around mastery. And I read George Leonard when I was 23, right? George Leonard's Mastery, and I thought there was a link here to Mastery. I think I went by it. Anyways, and there's a couple other books that here's George Leonard right here. So George was an author who served as a United States Army Air Force co-pilot and became a fifth degree Aikido person. So I think that was part of the reason why I read it. I think, David, you're aware I have this kind of like historical martial arts interest,
Yeah.
and there's like lots of different examples. My current one is like it's like the martial arts of the French Revolution. I mean, not the French Revolution, the Indian French. Is that the name of the war? The Indian French War. They had
Right.
muskets and they had knives and tomahawks, and they went to battle with those. And I find it kind of interesting. Anyways, um, a lot of this mastery stuff is applied to martial arts, and it often is, right? But it can be applied to sports. Becoming a master at football. I hope I wouldn't ever say I was a master at football, but I certainly played a long time, and then other aspects of your life. Like I know you feel free to brag about how successful your two daughters are, and so you must be a master at being a dad, right?
Right.
Um,
Right. Yeah. Art and science for sure.
yeah,
But I think what you're returning to is, this doesn't happen overnight. You're not going to master anything. I guess some people can master it easily, but to
no,
become,
it's lifelong. It's
it is
lifelong.
lifelong, right? So becoming a great teacher, I don't know if I'm a great teacher or not, but I practice at it all the time and I get better every year. And so I'm on that journey where, a little bit every year moves it along.
Just interject, David. One of the most interesting things from that George Leonard mastery book that I read when I was 23 is that mastery isn't a learning curve. Everyone thinks it is, right? It's not
Yeah.
what's that curve called, David? The hockey stick curve.
Yeah. The exponential growth.
I can't remember it. And so it's actually a step function. And so the whole time you're on the plateau, you're reinforcing the learning, and
Yes.
then you have this jump. And so you have to embrace and look forward to those jumps. Because then, it happened to me very pronounced in wrestling, right? You're like, the way I describe it to people is that, you're pretty terrible until one day you're not.
Right.
One day you're no longer the worst person in the room, and suddenly, things start coming your way, and it's incredibly exciting, right? And that experience I've had, throughout my career. I was pretty sucky at puppet for about a year, David.
Right.
And then one day I wasn't, and it's that jump, right? And it's just so interesting. And it's like it's learning theory, I'd argue, right? Isn't it, or is it not, or?
Yeah, there's this definitely idea. There's definitely the idea that we learn in a way that you just described it best. It's nonlinear. And so you're on what feels like a plateau, and you kind of have to just have faith that the next step up is, in the not too distant future. And so, as I have published as a researcher, it took me months and months and months to write my first paper. And now with the right team of co-authors, if we have the data and the analysis done, it just gets a lot easier. So what the practice
What's the fastest you've ever written a paper? Is it less than
I'm sorry?
What's the fastest you've ever written a paper?
6 days. Yeah. From a blank piece of paper. And that's not something to be proud of, but it does illustrate that if you keep practicing something, you can sort of take the friction out of doing all the easy stuff and then focus on the hard stuff more quickly.
This is it's like almost like I was joking with Nick. It's almost like we prepared this. Like that's a core part of fast system thinking is practice,
Right.
And it's in this article, this mastery, right? And so, I've been saying literally for years to people, it's practice, and like, well, how much is enough practice? Like, you'll know, like
right.
when it becomes essentially muscle memory, and
right.
and then that comes up in my Kubernetes work, like all my little tricks and tips and stuff with Kubernetes and getting quote unquote fast at it is essentially muscle memory, and like you're activating a different part of your brain, and like I actually read quite a bit about how that all works, in our basic nervous system and the benefits of it and so forth. It's really quite an interesting topic, but just to return to what you said, it's practice, and it's practice, all day long.
Right.
So we have 13 minutes. We basically buzzed through my agenda items for discussing fast system thinking. Maybe we could, in the last 5 minutes, then we could take a break because I'm going to be doing office hours after this. I'm not sure I can do that to you, David. Maybe what we could do is we could do a little bit of Krav ZT overview or something. What do you think?
Sure.
Okay. Yeah. So Krav ZT would be acceptable. So I'm just going to bring that up, and then I'll switch over. I think I mentioned the interface is kind of interesting with StreamYard. How you do it. You can't see it. It's on the host end. Um, Whoops. What I'm doing is just bringing up presentation. Okay. And so Krav in Hebrew refers to contact, and then the self-defense system Krav Maga refers to full contact combat, and so the Maga is combat. And I've kind of taken the principles and practice. I mentioned I was extremely interested in historical martial arts. I'm also extremely interested in Krav Maga. I did have a background where as I mentioned, I played football, and then I cross-trained in boxing and wrestling and judo, and that was all about playing football. But it gave me this kind of appreciation for those sports. And Krav Maga was the founder of Krav Maga was also a boxer and wrestler, and so he applied those very very heavily to his kind of doctrine. So I find it very interesting just from a personal level. And in fastest and full contact zero trust, David and I have been working on a methodology, a security methodology to approach zero trust networking. And the entirety of it is built upon basically situational awareness. And situational awareness is like a core part of Krav Maga. And then I was going to go through the kind of the secure, extensible, reliable, scalable, repeatable, David, and then the Krav ZT tenets. Did you have any comments to say? Or
No, I think that will take us to time, so I don't want to get in your way. I'm going to let you pick the mic up.
Yeah, sure. So we have these four, are they verbs, David? To be extensible. Yeah, they're verbs. So secure, extensible, reliable, scalable, repeatable. So this was a very interesting experience, David. I actually piped, basically I chunked up my resume and piped it through ChatGPT, and it came back with this analysis of my career. And these components are components of fast system thinking as well. They're the part of the Venn diagram that overlaps, and you might remember that. And I just find that fascinating that ChatGPT was able to produce this, and I like it. It's at the top of my resume. It's who I am. I'm apparently incredibly concerned with this, I guess, and I'm really all about it. Go ahead, David. Sorry.
No, I think that's exactly right, and it is interesting that obviously these things are related, but when you see the list, the brain is sort of able to walk through that list and think about, well, what does it mean to be secure? What does it mean to be extensible? What does it mean to be reliable? So I find it a fascinating subtext in this whole conversation. So thank you for highlighting it.
Yeah, thank you. And so the word that I find people kind of trip on the most is extensible, which I don't know how to describe it in English. It refers to being able to be extended, right? Being able to and so what does that mean in terms of automation? It means being able to leverage a project and then reuse it for something else, very easily, very quickly, to extend it, right? And I think one of the kind of the core aspects of that is composability. And composability refers to a tool having components and being composable, which refers to it being like Lego blocks, which is a huge opportunity with infrastructure code products like Puppet, like Ansible, like Terraform. You just snap together your components and you're done. It's wonderful. It's like I used to have a boss that called it the sweetness and light, which I love. I always kind of enjoyed, but it's kind of like that, right? It's so powerful, David.
No, I agree, and I appreciate you bringing up the Lego blocks metaphor, because you can think of that as the most fine-grained element, something like a block itself. But if you assemble blocks in a way that allows you to build a more intricate structure, this is kind of what network engineering is all about. You creating these things that are based on some atomic unit, like a router or a switch or a port or a connection. And then you're going from that sort of bits and bytes level up to, well, what's the service that our users are ultimately going to access? And how do we provide that in a way that, go back to those 5 words. How do we provide it in a way that is secure and all of the other things having to do with the other dimensions of the user experience, for lack of a better word?
No, I love that, David. It's a bad. I love what you said about the ports and the switches, but think of how extensible Wi-Fi was to, a traditional LAN. We just bolt in this little access point, and then everyone can walk to, you can work from the kitchen.
Right,
Incredible.
right.
And then thank you, David. I have to switch off seeing you, so I'm just gonna go back to the page, and then so the Krav ZT tenants. Once again, these Krav ZT tenants come directly from the Krav Maga, and the first one is be aggressive but smart in your problem solving. The second one is be vigilant in identifying and addressing challenges. The third one is be proactive based on your current weaknesses or vulnerabilities. React quickly when you have to. Then number 4, be tool agnostic, and that's come up quite a bit today. Did you notice that, David?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And number 5, invoke precision when executing tasks, and then employ simple and repeatable techniques. I think that's probably my favorite one. I'm going to ask you when we're done, David, what your favorite one is. And so the simple and repeatable techniques refers to that composability, right? So I'll loop back to that, but I'll let David answer that in a second. And then the 7th one is include situational awareness in all aspects of your practice, which is incredibly important to the stuff that we're discussing and teaching. And then number 8, understand and the impact of stress and planning on your response. I think that's my second favorite one. But David, did you have one that really kind of connects with you?
Yeah, it's funny because I'm going to go back to the one that you gave a little shout out to is being tool agnostic. And so if you think about combat, a lot of what you do is improvise, right? You read the situation, and that's back to the situational awareness that you grounded your second favorite in. But it's also, okay, the tools are going to change over time. They're going to change over your career, but the fundamentals are not. And so if you have something that is revolutionary, like, I don't know, cloud, right? So cloud is now in its entering its second decade of being deployed and being managed. Yeah. And at the time, people thought that, we're never going to be able to get our arms around it. But it was such a good idea to distribute things and make them available via services and separate, application from platform, from infrastructure. All of the thinking behind it was just so spot on. But ultimately, the concepts are tool agnostic. I know we have, a few major cloud vendors out there, and the security companies are addressing cloud still today. But all of that has to be done in a way that's tool agnostic, because people have preferences for different types of tools. And so same is true in full contact combat. Everyone will have their favorite tool to bring to that.
It's a great point. Like in my historical martial arts example about the French and Indian War, it was the tomahawk, but
right.
Believe it or not, the SEAL Team 6 actually carries tomahawks, David, because you can use it to enter, buildings, right?
Right.
But anyways, so moving on. I lost my train of thought. Oh darn it! I think we're at time, David. I can't thank you enough. I'm definitely getting you a soda stream for your birthday.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
And thank you for hosting today and having Nick on as well. It was educational for all of us as lifelong learners.
Yeah, it was wonderful. I really enjoyed both of you as guests, and I look forward to our next one, which is May 8th. Actually, May 1st. And we're gonna have my old boss, and that's not very not appropriate. My a boss early in my career, Sunil Yu, and his cyber defense matrix, and we're gonna be talking about Krav ZT and how it works and how it was so heavily inspired by the cyber defense matrix. And so that one will be just as fun. So thank you so much, David.
Awesome. Thank you, Thomas.
Bye
bye now.
Hey, everyone out in userland, I'm going to be shutting down the webinar. I am moving on to having a office hours, and so you're welcome to come join, and we can talk about zero trust or just automation and hyper automation, whatever you want. I'll drop the Zoom link into this webinar's chat, and then feel free to pick it up, and then I'll close it down like a good minute or so after. And it's just been a tremendous pleasure getting to kind of socialize all this stuff with everyone, and thank you everyone for tuning in. I really appreciate it. I appreciate your support, and I look forward to hearing from you if you have any comments or questions or anything you need. So the Zoom link is coming into the chat right now. Feel free to drop by if you have any questions, and that's about it. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in here. write a little thing because interestingly, this post to YouTube and all the other different avenues. That's kind of neat. Here is my link. Super duper. Well, that's super cool. I'm gonna look at the YouTube one. I have a feeling that's kind of probably the best one. How cool. Wow, that's cool. Okay, I'm going to close it down, everybody. Thank you so much for joining, and I hope to see you in the office hours. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.